see Susana at the bar. She told me Corona's her favorite beer. I think you should buy her a friendly round. It's a long way from Harvard to here. Please welcome Susana Martinez-Conde.
It's great to be back here. It's my second time speaking at TAM. I thought this year I would do something different. In the last year since I spoke, Stephen Macknick and I have become the columnists on illusions for Scientific American Mind. And so I thought that I would take the opportunity to tell you about our next installment of our column on illusions. This one is not out yet. It will be out next month, and it's going to be on faithful resemblances. Let me ask by defining very simply what I consider an illusion. An illusion is a subjective perception that doesn't match the real world. So if we're talking about a visual illusion, we may see something that is not there, or fail to see something that is there, or in general see something different from what is there. Now, I am trained as a visual neuroscientist, and in neuroscience, cognitive perceptual neuroscience especially, we use illusions as tools to understand what are the operations and the mechanisms, the algorithms that our brain is using to construct our experience of the world. And they're critical because of this dissociation between the reality that is out there and our subjective perception, which may or may not match reality. But illusions are also very important tools and heuristics in critical thinking. Now, in the neuroscience of illusion that I'm going to approach today, just very quickly, I want to focus on visual illusions in particular, and we have illusions in all sensory modalities, and we have cognitive illusions as well, but I want to focus on visual illusions, and particularly on illusions in which we see something that is not there, or we see something different from what is there. Now, we experience illusions all the time. Most of what we perceive is at least partly an illusion. Very rarely we have 100% correspondence between our perception and the real world. So we experience illusions. But what's important is what we do with the illusion, whether we ascribe meaning to the illusion or not. And if we ascribe illusory meaning, illusory significance to a visual illusion, then we have a case of what we call a visual pareidolia. And we have pareidolias in other senses as well. But I'm going to focus on visual pareidolias today, and particularly on those involving faces, which happen a lot of the time. Now, this is not a coincidence that pareidolia illusions often have to do with faces. And what I'm proposing here is that this has to do both with our brain's exquisite circuits for face detection and face processing, and also for our brain's ability to fill in gaps and detect patterns. Let's talk about filling gaps first. I want to show you some illusions. Some of them are not very well known. This is a version of the famous Kanitsa triangle. We have the three Pac-Men, but see what happens here. These three patches of gray, they're moving up and down and generating not only an illusory triangle, but an illusory pyramid. Now realize we don't have a triangle, we don't have a pyramid, we have three Pac-Men and three rectangles with three different shades of gray. But our brain manages to take this information and construct a fairly complex geometrical figure in which we have volume and shape and depth and so on. This illusion, by the way, won the second prize in the Best Illusion of the Year contest a few years ago. This is a contest that we have yearly in Florida, and my laboratory is a main host of this contest. I'll show you a few other illusions from the contest later on. But in the next illusion, I'm going to ask you to participate actively. We're going to do an exercise, all of us together. I would like you to, just like the cartoon is doing, to extend your arms like this. Actually, touch your thumbs. The cartoon is not touching his thumbs, but go ahead and do this, the double loser sign. And now I'd like you to close your right eye and look at your right finger, just like I'm doing. But at the same time, pay attention to the tip of your left finger. So you're closing your right eye, looking at your right finger, but paying attention to the tip of the left finger. You may need to move it a little bit to the sides, and the tip should disappear when you find your blind spot. All right? Now let's do it again. Make your left finger disappear again. But now, pay attention and see if you can see anything behind the finger. Is there a hole, or do you see behind the finger? Do you see anything? Yeah. So how is that possible? We don't have X-ray vision. What's happening is that our brain is taking the information from the areas surrounding the finger, and this area where we have no photoreceptors, all that we have is the nerves, the optic nerves, leaving the eye and connecting the eye to the brain. And we don't have any information, but instead of seeing a big hole, our brain is filling in the gaps with the texture, the colors, the general visual information that is surrounding that area. Now that algorithm isn't smart enough to recreate the whole finger, but it's doing a pretty good job. And this that happens in vision happens in other senses. It happens with our mental processes, our cognition, our memories. It happens all the time. Oh, and you can also use this trick to decapitate people that annoy you. That's something always useful. All right. Another instance of our brain filling in information and actually detecting patterns, in this case detecting regularities where there is none. This is an illusion, also was a top 10 finalist in the Illusion of the Year contest. The author is Ryota Kanai, and he calls it the healing grid. If you take a look at this pattern, you can see that there's a regular pattern in the center. We have perfectly regular squares connected to each other, but now, towards the sides, we have a bunch of crosses that are sort of like randomly interspersed. There is no regularity to the pattern. Now let's do another exercise here. I'm going to ask you to look at the very center of this grid as carefully as you can, but pay attention to what happens in the outsides of the grid. The whole thing becomes regular. Our brain is imposing a pattern, it's imposing regularity where there is random noise. Happens all the time. What about faces? Let me introduce you to the fusiform face area of the brain. You can see it highlighted in red in this rotating brain. This is a brain region that is dedicated to processing of face information. Now, and this that I'm saying here very simply is actually pretty amazing, because we have over 24 areas in the brain that are in charge of processing visual information, edges and corners and contours, color, motion. But as for specific objects itself, this is very rare, to have an area of the brain that is dedicated to processing faces and nothing else. I mean, we don't have a pineapple processing area, but we do have a face processing area because faces are so important to us, to the way that our brain is hardwired, to how we navigate the world, how we interact with each other as social animals. And this is from a classic experiment from a visual and oculomotor scientist called Yarbus, and this is a Russian realistic painting. It's called The Unexpected Visitor. And if you present this painting to observers and track their eye movement, just like Yarbus did in his laboratory, this is what you find. When you ask people, just observe this scene freely. These are their eye movement paths. You can see that they're very much focused on the faces. That's where our eyes want to go. By the way, this doesn't happen just with human faces. It also happens with dogs' faces. I'm going to show you a little movie from recordings done in my laboratory at the Barrow Neurological Institute in Phoenix. And what you're going to see is 30 seconds of the eye movements of an observer, a human subject, that we asked to look at a scene just in any way he or she wanted during 30 seconds. And notice how the eye moves over the scene. This is reconstructed a bit faster than in real time. It's looking all over the place, but more often than not, it's looking at the faces of the puppies. So that's how we explore the world. We focus on faces, like these faces. And because we focus on faces so much, sometimes we don't notice potentially more important information, such as the fact that this child has 2 thumbs. We look at faces, and they're more meaningful, more significant to us than other types of information in the world. Which also makes it interesting to me. I'm going to show you another one of my favorite illusions involving faces. And this is sort of a paradox to me, because we focus so much and so well on faces that when we look at this family staring at the horizon, it takes us a while to figure out that they all have the same face. Face illusions have been there for a long time. These are the famous paintings by Arcimboldo. These are not actual faces. They're configurations of fruits and vegetables arranged in the shape of a face. But it doesn't really bother us that the skin tone is all wrong. We have a green nose and we have a turnip for an ear. We don't care because it's still activating our face detecting circuits in our brain. This is a more contemporary version of the Arcimboldo illusions with vegetables. I love this one. I don't know what he's holding in his hand. It looks like maybe some bacon from last night. It's every vegetarian's nightmare, I can tell you. Another painting by Arcimboldo. Now, here we have a bowl of vegetables. We have some onions and carrots and so on, until we turn it upside down. And then it becomes a face. We can see a man with round cheeks and red lips and a bowler's hat. Now, this tells us something important about the brain, and it's that our face processing neurons are wired up for processing face information that is right side up. When it's upside down, we don't really recognize faces very well. Now, you can think intuitively that it makes sort of sense because adaptively it cannot have mattered very much that we couldn't recognize upside down faces. I mean, it cannot have that much of an impact on our survival or reproductive success, which is why illusions like this work. So here we have 3 beautiful women. This is from a Dove commercial. Let's now turn them right side up. Not so pretty anymore. This is a contemporary version of an illusion discovered about 30 years ago by Peter Thompson, a visual scientist. So the faces are fine, it's just the eyes and the mouths have been turned right side up, upside down, I should say. But when the faces are inverted, we don't really notice there's anything wrong with them. This is another face illusion that comes from the Best Illusion of the Year contest, this edition that we had last May in Florida. What you need to do in this illusion that is going to feature how our neural adaptation circuits, when our neurons adapt to some information and there are some post-adaptation effects, this also works well in face space. So rather than describing it anymore, let me show it to you. You'll need to look at the very center, at the cross, while paying attention to the faces of these beautiful celebrities, and you should see something interesting. Oops. Uh-oh. No. No worries. I clicked twice. Okay. Okay, here we go. So remember to look at the very center and pay attention to the faces. Some ugly celebrities. Meryl Streep always gets me. So beauty is really in the eye of the beholder. And you can check out this paper in the journal Perception. We really need very few information to perceive faces. This is what we call in visual science and psychology moonifaces. They're really basically black and white patches with very limited visual information, and yet with this just a few brushstrokes, we can see these faces, we can see the orientation of the face, we can even detect their emotional expressions, and this is why, filling in the rest of the information that is missing, we can see faces in configurations such as this one. This is from a movie a few years ago. It says, "It's not your imagination." Well, actually, it is your imagination. Because there is no actual face in this image. All we have is branches and leaves and birds, and we can see pretty accurately Sandra Bullock's face there. And we can also see faces in this type of configuration. Or this one. Or that one. Or even this one. Now this one sold for $28,000 in eBay, so pareidolia can be lucrative. So what happens when we see something like this in our grilled cheese sandwich? Well, let's go back to the fusiform face area of the brain. There is an article that just came out early this year, some new research done by Ming Men and colleagues that they published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society, and they found that these left and right fusiform face areas are not actually identical. They have different roles. The left face area is activated both by faces and by objects that look like faces. But the right fusiform face area has stronger activation than actual faces than to objects that look like faces. Now, in this paper, the researchers presented, they were doing fMRI imaging of the brains of subjects. Well, they presented actual faces and objects that look like faces, but we're talking about the fronts of cars or the windows and door on a house, things like that. They were not showing the grilled cheese Virgin Mary. But now I have a prediction to make, and this maybe is the subject for future scientific inquiry. But what I conclude from this research is that you may be a believer if a grilled cheese sandwich activates your right fusiform gyros. So that's a topic for future study. Other famous pareidolias, you may remember this one. This is from the 9/11 attacks. And this is the World Trade Center after being hit by the second plane. This picture has not been modified. It hasn't been photoshopped. The photographer was able to make a convincing case of that. It appeared on the front page of several newspapers as the face of evil in 9/11, and the photographer himself received over 30,000 email messages about the feelings that this face evoked in the readers of these newspapers. Now, the photographer retired that very day from photojournalism, but the picture lived on, and just a year after was analyzed by a team of computer scientists, and they were able to conclude, doing a geometric analysis, that this is actually what you would expect from fire and explosions, that they produce these cone shapes of smoke in which vertical and horizontal lines are oftentimes superimposed. And the quote is from this paper: "The observed face-like shape can be naturally explained by the physics and geometry of fire," as I'm sure most of you would have guessed. This one comes from Canada, It's a Canadian bill, dollar bill, I guess for $20. And it's from the early 1950s. Queen Elizabeth had just been crowned Queen of England, and they prepared new currency to celebrate the fact. Now, if you look at her hair, there's a little face. Now, here's highlighted in red, so you have a better idea. This series became known as the Devil's Head series. And this is what I would call having a royal bad hair day. But it wasn't in circulation for long. It actually only lasted for 2 or 3 years because the Canadian government decided to darken the highlights in Her Majesty's hair to exorcise the King of Hell from Canadian currency. This one has been making the rounds in some of the paranormal sites out there in the internet. You can see a couple. They seem to be having some sort of picnic or something. They have a huge head sitting right between them, and it's not a head. It's actually a little child sitting on the man's lap. But our brain is connecting the dots between things that actually don't make any sense. When I first saw this picture, it actually reminded me of some of the artworks by Salvador Dali. This is The Slave Market and the Disappearing Bust of Voltaire. And you can see Voltaire's face here, in which his eyes and nose and mouth are composed by the bodies of these two little children. Now, Salvador Dali called his method of artistic creation the paranoiac critical method. And he explicitly said that in this paranoiac critical method of creation, what he's trying to do is get the viewer's mind to connect things that shouldn't be connected in reality. Now, paranoia and pareidolia, they actually have the same root in the word, so that's probably appropriate. I have one last pareidolia to show you, but I would like to put it in context. And I'm going to show you a little video clip from a movie, one of my favorite movies. It's called Idiocracy. Can I have a show of hands for people who have seen it? Oh, good, most of you. All right, well, for those of you who haven't seen it, we are in the future. It's the 2500s. It's society has taken a plummet in intelligence, and the entertainment industry has followed suit. The most popular TV show of the time is called Ow, My Balls, and the title says it all.
Next on the Violence Channel, an all-new Ow, My Balls. The balls. You're gonna get hit in the balls.
Now, that's always fun to watch, but you may be wondering, what does it have to do with pareidolia? And, well, actually, from the pages of the journal Images in Clinical Urology comes this article. This is an actual peer-reviewed journal. It's The Face of Testicular Pain, a Surprising Ultrasound Finding. And let me read you the summary of the article here. A scrotal ultrasound scan of a patient with a painful inflammatory mass surprisingly revealed a face in the image, which looked like a man experiencing painful stimuli. And these are some quotes from the paper. The residents and staff alike were amazed to see the outline of a man's face staring up out of the image, his mouth agape. A brief debate ensued on whether the image could have been a sign from a deity, perhaps Min, the Egyptian god of male virility. However, the consensus deemed it a mere coincidental occurrence rather than a divine proclamation. The man's testicle was removed and the tumor was benign, if you can call benign having a screaming man in your testicle, that is. Now, as I'm sure that you're wondering what this face in pain looked like, let me give you the ow my balls illusion. All right, I think this is a good time to wrap it up. The Scientific American column on faithful resemblances is coming out next month, and I'd like you to check it out. Also, the editor-in-chief of Scientific American Mind, or Scientific American rather, Mariette Cristina, has donated 500 magazines of the Scientific American Mind that is now on newsstands, so you can come and pick one up during the book signing later. And make sure to also check out the website for the Best Illusion of the Year contest. We're now preparing for the 9th edition of the contest, so we have an archive of 80 illusions that you can check out, including some of the illusions that we saw today, and you can also contribute your own illusions to participate. Thank you very much.